And let's keep it in Michigan, because joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell of the Mitten State. Congresswoman, thanks for joining on the holiday. Happy 4th of July. Let's start, though, where Jillian left off, because I think those voters sound a lot different than some of your colleagues on the Hill. At this point, 2 House members have come out and told Biden to step aside. There are reports, and I've heard this too, of Democrats considering various letters that ask the president to withdraw. What's your sense of how real those efforts are, and is it counterproductive for Democrats to even be doing this?
So, first of all, happy 4th of July, Ellie. And it's a good day to be having some of these discussions. I've just finished my 4th parade. And, I'm going to talk about that. Look, the Congress is a representative body, right? So members of Congress represent the people that are out there. And I've heard many people, just like the people that you just showed that were interviewed in Michigan. I know there are people that have other feelings, and they yelled that out from the parade. I have colleagues who are concerned, and I have colleagues that are concerned the other way about change and the nominating process and untested candidates. I still think this just comes down to one thing. President Biden, who I love, who has done a great job for the last 3.5 years, is respected by every one of my Democratic colleagues, has to get out there and show people. He met with the governors. The Governor Newsom came out of that meeting, along with mine and others, publicly supporting him. He clearly had a discussion with them that he needed them and that he could do this job, and proved it, because these are not shy and retiring people, the governors, and he's got to do that to the American people.
You mentioned here something that I've heard, a sentiment from your colleagues, the idea that you love the president. You also have the benefit of knowing him. NBC News is reporting that the president is sort of torn right now behind the scenes between a defiant posture and one of acceptance. What does that tell you?
Look, it is not easy. Any human being that was not upset or hurt or by what they have watched everybody do since last Thursday. First of all, look, you're competitive. I'm competitive. Competitive may not be the right word. We want to do a good job when we do our job every day. Any Thursday night, he blew it. It was not a good debate. You can't sugarcoat it. And then nobody's talking about the bad job Donald Trump did. Nobody's talking about all the lies he told. Nobody's talking about all the things he doubled down on. They've been after Joe Biden all week. So he's got one thing to do, which is to get up and go out to prove to people that he can do the job, will do the job, and has the stamina. Took too long to make some of the phone calls he should have. I think he's in a bubble wrap by many of his senior staff. And I think he's starting to do what he has to do. One interview tomorrow is not going to fix this. Yeah. But it's a really complicated time right now. But when you say that, wouldn't any human being be feeling that way right now if they had as many people attacking him as he did?
Certainly, that's the point that the White House has been trying to make, too, as they try to turn the page here. If we were in the halls of Congress, as we usually are, Congresswoman, the first thing I would have asked you is that there was a call with Democratic House leadership last night, and we've had minimal reports of what the conversation was like there. I wonder if you could fill us in.
Sometimes conversations are meant to be conversations among colleagues and not shared with the media. And I have to say that I'm pleasantly stunned that nothing has come out. People.
The topic had to be the president, right?
Well, we're talking about our colleagues and what's happening out there. People love him. Every single person talked to him about how much they loved him, and they shared what they were hearing, and they shared a whole lot of perspectives, and that's where it needed to stay, inside that leadership meeting. And as much as I love you, not in any of the media outlets.
You know what, though? We always have to try, and certainly we'll pick up again with it next week.
And I love you and I respect you.
But if it's not Joe Biden, and one of your colleagues, Jim Clyburn, floated this idea of a mini primary during an interview, saying it would basically involve trying to win the remaining uncommitted delegates. I mean, when I hear something like Jim Clyburn saying that, this is a man who we often look to as a barometer in Biden world. Does he know something about what's coming in this race that we don't, that he's suggesting a process for how it could go forward?
Well, he knows something that I don't know. So I want to be really clear on that. And I think sometimes we overread into everything. You talked a minute ago about how you were hearing about letters. I think that's a legend. I absolutely think it is a legend at this point. I've been hearing about the letters for 4 days. Nobody has seen them. I talked to a lot of members of Congress. No one has seen it. People I talked to haven't been asked to sign it. And yet everybody's been talking about it like this is the lead thing. Jim's been asked a ton of questions, just as you said. He's one of the barometers. He's very close to the Bidens, and everybody's overreading. Everybody's talking about a whole lot of things or a whole lot of things. I think we have to take it day by day. We've got to see the president get out there, show that he's got the stamina, talk directly to the American people, not to members of Congress, not to donors, the American people. And these next few days are very, very important.
Yeah, and I think you point out something important, too, about these letters. Like, there's a lot, I think, that we're trying to track on Capitol Hill that just never makes it public, and in large part because it might just be that the members aren't there to be in that place. And I think that's notable, too. I think as we look ahead, though, you've said the outreach to from Biden to fellow Democrats should have come sooner, as well as the fact that one interview isn't just going to make this all go away. But when you talk to your colleagues, are there specific, tangible things that Biden can do to help them shake this feeling? Vibes are kind of hard to change.
I think that we have to see him out there. Look, the Joe Biden that I know and love, that's with people, that is allowed to be spontaneous. That, I heard a couple of people tell me about, he signed a bill for Parkinson's disease that we had all passed this week. And Jennifer Wexton was there and Gus Bilirakis were there. And people in the room said they started to cry. It was the Joe Biden I know. Many of you know, watching. Jennifer Wexton's one of my colleagues from Virginia, who was only diagnosed a year ago and is facing very, very real and visible challenges. And he was, everybody who described it to me, he was the Joe Biden I know. The last time I saw him 2 weeks ago, we were talking cars, and everybody knows how much Joe Biden talks cars. But he's got to show it. He's got to get out there, show the sustained strength, and take it on head on. And directly, not hide, and it's got to be more than one interview.
I think he and the White House have certainly been trying to do that. I think one thing before we go is the separate conversation that seems to be happening is if there is any moment where he decides to step aside, should Kamala Harris be the nominee?
Again, don't think it's great to get into that kind of speculation, though I think that she is the vice president. It's a Biden-Harris ticket. That's what people have voted on. I think look, I'm going to be very, very careful. I come from Michigan, so it's even, but my governor, my friend, who I've talked to every single day, is made it very clear, despite, again, knives coming out for her, she is 100% Biden-Harris.
When you say you want to be careful there, is it because you don't want to like push the idea that it could be Whitmer, or I just want to be clear?
Because everybody was Whitmer last weekend. Right. And that is why she did make the phone call. She's 100%, but it's not mine to say what she's going to do. I can say, because I've talked to her and she has told me, I can tell everybody she is 100% Biden-Harris, period, 100%. And she came out. I have not talked to her today because, as I said, I've had 4 parades. Yeah. But, she was one of the governors that was very strong when she came out yesterday. So.
Well, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, thank you for taking a break from pounding the parade pavement to come and talk to us. I'll see you back on the Hill next week. I appreciate it.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.